A change is gonna come. Marcus Johnson stared out the window of the Greyhound bus, watching the Mississippi landscape roll by in a blur of green and brown. The year was 1963, and at 22 years old, Marcus felt the world's weight on his shoulders. He was leaving behind everything he'd ever known in his small hometown of Clarksdale, a place where racial segregation and discrimination were a daily reality, headed for the promise of a new life in Chicago. As the bus rumbled northward, Marcus couldn't help but think about all that had led him to this moment. He'd grown up poor, the son of sharecroppers who worked from sunup to sundown to put food on the table. Despite the hardships, his parents had always emphasized the importance of education, believing it was the key to a better future. Marcus's resilience in the face of adversity was a testament to his unwavering determination. Marcus had been a gifted student, excelling in his studies, despite the subpar conditions of the segregated schools he attended. He'd dreamed of attending college, becoming a doctor or a lawyer, someone who could make a real difference in his community. But dreams, he'd learned, often collided harshly with reality. The summer after his high school graduation, Marcus took a job at the local general store, hoping to save money for college. There, he experienced a moment that would change the course of his life forever. One sweltering afternoon, a well-dressed white woman entered the store, her nose wrinkling in distaste as she surveyed the dusty shelves. Marcus, eager to prove himself a good worker, had approached her with a polite smile. "Can I help you find anything, ma'am?" he'd asked. The woman had recoiled as if he'd struck her, her face contorting in anger. "How dare you speak to me, boy?" she'd spat. "Don't you know your place?" Before Marcus could respond, the store owner appeared, profusely apologizing to the woman and ordering Marcus to go to the back room. Later that day, he'd been fired, told that he was too uppity for his good. The incident left a deep scar on Marcus's spirit, igniting a fire in his belly, a burning desire for change that couldn't be extinguished. The incident had sparked a fire in Marcus's belly, a burning desire for change that couldn't be extinguished. He'd thrown himself into the burgeoning civil rights movement, attending meetings and participating in peaceful protests. But with each passing day, the dangers grew. Friends were beaten, arrested, or worse. His parents, fearing for his safety, begged him to leave to seek a better life in the North. And here he was, on this bus, carrying little more than the clothes on his back, and the fierce determination in his heart. As the miles stretched, Marcus found his mind drifting to the future he hoped to build in Chicago. He imagined himself working hard, saving money, and maybe even going to night school to get that college degree finally. He dreamed of a day when he could walk down the street without fear, enter any restaurant or store, and be treated with dignity and respect. But even as hope bloomed in his chest, doubt crept in at the edges. Would things be different in Chicago? He'd heard stories of the northern cities, of the subtle discrimination that lurked beneath the surface. Would he simply be trading one set of challenges for another? As the bus crossed the state line into Illinois, Marcus straightened his seat, pushing aside his fears. He couldn't afford to dwell on what might go wrong. He had to believe that change was possible, and that a better future was within reach. If not for himself, then for the generations to come. The Greyhound pulled into the Chicago bus station, late in the evening. Marcus stepped off, his legs stiff from the long journey, and looked around in awe at the bustling terminal. He'd never seen so many people in one place, a sea of faces of all colors moving in a chaotic dance. With his single suitcase in hand, Marcus made his way out onto the street. The city stretched before him, a sprawling maze of towering buildings and neon lights. For a moment, he felt overwhelmed by its sheer size and energy. But then he squared his shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped forward into his new life, filled with a sense of hope and optimism for what lay ahead. The first few weeks in Chicago were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus had arrived with the address of his cousin Jeremiah, who'd moved to the city a few years earlier. Jeremiah welcomed him with open arms, offering him a place to stay and helping him navigate the complexities of urban life. In Jeremiah and the vibrant community he found in Chicago, Marcus found a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. Through Jeremiah's connections, Marcus secured a job at a factory on the South Side. The work was grueling, and the hours were long, but Marcus threw himself into it with determination. Each paycheck brought him one step closer to his goals. Marcus explored the city in his free time, marveling at the diversity he encountered. He saw interracial couples walking hand in hand, which would have been unthinkable back in Clarksdale. He visited jazz clubs, where black musicians played to integrated audiences. For the first time, he felt a sense of possibility, of doors opening rather than closing. But as the weeks turned to months, Marcus began to see the cracks in the facade of Northern equality. He noticed how the neighborhoods were still largely segregated, with black families crammed into overcrowded, run-down areas. He saw the suspicion in the eyes of white shopkeepers when he entered their stores. He heard the whispers of discontent among his co-workers, who spoke of unfair treatment and limited opportunities for advancement, realizing that discrimination was not confined to the South. One evening, as he walked home from work, Marcus encountered a group of young men handing out flyers on a street corner. Curious, he approached and took one, scanning the bold text that proclaimed, "Join the fight for equal rights. Community meeting tonight." Something stirred in Marcus's heart, rekindling the passion that had driven him in Mississippi. Without hesitation, he decided to attend the meeting. The gathering was held in the basement of a local church, the room packed with people of all ages. A hush fell over the crowd as Marcus squeezed into a seat near the back. A tall, imposing man stepped up to the podium, his voice ringing with power and conviction. "Brothers and sisters," he began, "we've come north seeking a better life, seeking the freedom and equality we were promised. But let me ask you this, have we found it? Are we truly free when our children attend overcrowded, underfunded schools? Are we equal when relegated to the lowest-paying jobs, with no hope of advancement?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Marcus nodded along, the speaker's words resonating deeply with his own experiences. "The time has come," the man continued, his voice rising, "for us to stand up and demand the rights that are rightfully ours. We cannot wait for change to come to us, we must be the agents of that change." As the meeting progressed, plans were laid out for peaceful protests and boycotts. Marcus listened intently, feeling a familiar fire igniting within him. He was among the first to raise his hand when volunteers were called for. Marcus threw himself into the movement in the following weeks with renewed vigor. He attended planning meetings, helped distribute flyers, and participated in sit-ins at segregated businesses. It wasn't easy. There were times when he faced angry mobs, felt the sting of racial slurs, and even spent a night in jail. But with each challenge, his resolve only grew stronger. Marcus met Sarah, a passionate young activist from the West Side, through his involvement in the movement. She was fierce and intelligent, with a quick wit that challenged and captivated him as they worked side by side for the cause, and a deep bond formed between them. One night, after a particularly grueling day of protests, Sarah and Marcus sat on the steps of her apartment building, talking late into the night. "Do you ever wonder if it's all worth it?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with fatigue. "Sometimes it feels like for every step forward we take, we're pushed 2 steps back." Sarah was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Then she turned to him, her eyes shining with determination. "Of course it's worth it," she said softly. "Every small victory, every mind we change, every barrier we break down, it all adds up. We might not see the final result in our lifetime, but we're laying the groundwork for future generations." She reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a jolt through him. "We have to believe that change is coming, Marcus. It might be slow or hard, but it's inevitable. And we're part of making it happen." As Marcus looked into Sarah's eyes, he felt something shift inside him. The weariness and doubt weighing him down seemed to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that he'd found a cause to believe in, and a partner to stand beside him in the fight. The years that followed were filled with both triumphs and setbacks. Marcus and Sarah married, the union a testament to their shared commitment to each other, and the ongoing struggle for equality. They celebrated the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and the Voting Rights Act in 1965, even as they recognized that legal changes didn't automatically translate to lived equality. Marcus pursued his dream of education, attending night classes at a local community college, while continuing to work at the factory. Balancing work, school, family, and his ongoing activism wasn't easy, but the support of Sarah and their growing circle of friends in the movement kept him going. In 1968, the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sent shockwaves through the community. Marcus and Sarah joined thousands of others in mourning, their grief mingled with a fierce determination to carry on the work Dr. King had championed. As the 1960s gave way to the 1970s, Marcus and Sarah welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Hope. Looking at his newborn daughter's face, Marcus felt an overwhelming mix of love and responsibility. He vowed to continue fighting for a world where Hope would have every opportunity to thrive, where she would be judged not by her skin color, but by her character's content. As Marcus approaches his 80th birthday in 2021, he sits on the porch of the modest home he and Sarah worked so hard to buy all those years ago. The neighborhood around him has changed, evolving with the times just as he has. He thinks back on the long journey that brought him here, from that bus ride out of Mississippi to the protests in Chicago's streets, from factory worker to community leader, and eventually to retired grandfather. He watches his grandchildren play in the yard, their laughter floating on the warm summer breeze. They live in a world that is, in many ways, vastly different from the one he grew up in. They attend integrated schools, have friends of all races, and can dream big without the suffocating limitations they once faced. Yet Marcus knows that the work is far from over. He sees news reports of ongoing racial injustice and new forms of discrimination and inequality. He hears the echo of the old struggles in the voices of a new generation of activists calling out for change. But as he looks at his grandchildren, at the world they're growing up in, Marcus feels a profound sense of hope. He thinks of all the people who fought alongside him over the years, of the small victories, significant breakthroughs, and the slow but steady march toward justice. A smile crosses his weathered face as he remembers the words that have carried him through the decades, the belief that sustained him through every trial and tribulation: a change will come. It might be slow and hard-won, but it's always on its way. And with each passing day, each new voice raised in the cause of justice, that change draws ever closer. As the sun begins to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Marcus closes his eyes and offers a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey he's traveled, for the progress he's witnessed, and for the hope that continues to burn bright in the hearts of those who believe in a better tomorrow. The change is still coming, he thinks. And we'll keep pushing forward, one step at a time, until it arrives.